In one of the most politically volatile developments of the summer, the Epstein files have exploded back into the national conversation, and former President Donald Trump is now squarely in the spotlight, not necessarily for wrongdoing, but for the political ramifications of being named in sensitive documentation that, while not implicating him in any crime, nonetheless fuels growing scrutiny, speculation, and internal conflict among his own party members and administration officials. Especially as explosive revelations emerged that Pam Bondi, the former Florida Attorney General and now Trump's legal point person, briefed him as early as May that his name appeared among hundreds in the documents connected to the Jeffrey Epstein investigation, a fact that was previously unknown to the public and first reported by the Wall Street Journal, now reigniting the fury among MAGA-aligned media voices and congressional hardliners who had been demanding transparency from the Department of Justice for years, especially after Bondi herself had publicly promised to release Epstein's so-called client list back in February on Fox News, claiming it was sitting right on her desk, a declaration that set off a firestorm of conspiracy theories and political pressure, only to result months later in disappointment when both Bondi and Kash Patel, now FBI director, issued a joint statement confirming no such client list was found and dismissing the ongoing theory that Epstein was murdered rather than dying by suicide, a position that has now backfired against them politically, as critics accuse them of becoming agents of the same deep state they once vowed to dismantle. All while Trump, who reportedly was told his name was in the documents during a routine briefing, also attended by Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche, has since attempted to downplay the matter by insisting publicly that the documents are made up by his political enemies, including Barack Obama and former FBI Director James Comey, despite the briefing itself and the underlying documentation being authenticated through official DOJ channels, creating a cascade of contradictions and inconsistencies that only deepen public distrust and fuel the Washington scandal machine, especially as Bondi emphasized to Trump that many prominent figures, not just him, were mentioned in the documents, while simultaneously briefing him that the DOJ found no Epstein client list and no credible evidence that Epstein's death was anything but a suicide, directly contradicting what many in the MAGA base continued to believe. An irony not lost on political observers who watched Trump, Patel, and Bondi previously promote full disclosure of all Epstein files during campaign rallies, only to now appear as if they're participating in the very obstruction their movement was built to oppose. A development made worse by Wednesday's court ruling in Florida, where a judge denied the DOJ's request to unseal grand jury testimony in the case, despite the Justice Department's attempt to argue that public interest warranted its release, a move widely interpreted as an attempt by the administration to appease its conservative base and avoid further damage as the story continues to spiral into political quicksand, with fresh questions now emerging about how much Trump actually knew, when he knew it, and whether he ever intended to follow through on his campaign promises to reveal the full truth about Epstein, especially given that his name had already appeared in flight logs, in old photographs with Epstein, and was known to have socialized with him in years past. Although White House Communications Director Stephen Chong has reaffirmed that Trump ejected Epstein from Mar-a-Lago for inappropriate behavior, and that simply being named in the documents does not imply guilt. Still, the timing and optics of these revelations are politically damaging, particularly as they intersect with efforts by some Republican lawmakers to push the issue further, evidenced by the House Oversight Subcommittee's decision to vote 8-2 to subpoena the DOJ for the Epstein files, in a surprising move that saw GOP reps Nancy Mace, Scott Perry, and Brian Jack breaking with Speaker Mike Johnson to side with Democrats in a growing intra-party rebellion, while Committee Chair Comer separately subpoenaed Ghislaine Maxwell, Epstein's longtime associate, a day after Blanche announced plans to visit her in prison, sparking alarm due to concerns that Trump, as president, retains the ability to pardon or commute Maxwell's sentence, raising concerns that she could be incentivized to offer selective testimony that might politically benefit Trump, especially if it casts doubt on his knowledge or involvement, a move that many fear could undermine public faith in justice while handing MAGA influencers another talking point to weaponize, all which underscores the deepening fractures within the GOP over how to handle the Epstein fallout,
with summer recess looming and town halls expected to reflect the tension between Trump loyalists and accountability-driven conservatives. As new polling reveals the rift, with a Quinnipiac survey showing that 40% of Republicans approve of Trump's handling of the Epstein issue, while 36% disapprove, and a CBS YouGov poll indicating that only 11% of Republicans consider Epstein-related matters central to how they evaluate Trump's presidency. A disconnect that further complicates the political calculus for a campaign already juggling legal challenges, voter fatigue, and ongoing media scrutiny, leading Trump to revert to familiar political tactics, such as deflecting by launching renewed attacks on Barack Obama and reviving claims that the Obama administration engineered a plot to undermine his presidency through the Russia investigation, a theory revived during a briefing led by Tulsi Gabbard at the White House, where she brandished a declassified Republican-authored intelligence report, originally written during Trump's first term, alleging that Obama orchestrated a politically motivated intelligence assessment that falsely suggested Russia interfered in the 2016 election to help Trump, even though the overwhelming bipartisan consensus, including findings from the Republican-led Senate Intelligence Committee chaired by Marco Rubio, concluded that Russia did in fact work to help Trump and harm Hillary Clinton, highlighting that Gabbard's statements are not supported by the broader intelligence community, with Democrats slamming the move as responsible and dangerous, accusing her of endangering U.S. intelligence assets and sending a chilling message to whistleblowers and foreign sources that providing politically sensitive information could now be weaponized or publicly exposed. All while Trump continues to claim that Obama should be in prison, an argument that ironically undermines itself due to last year's Supreme Court ruling granting former presidents broad immunity from prosecution related to official acts, a legal shield that would apply to Obama as well, thus neutralizing Trump's own inflammatory rhetoric, yet doing little to quiet the fury within the conservative base, who now see the Epstein scandal not as resolved, but as a festering wound in the credibility of the Trump administration, which promised truth and transparency and now stands accused of selectively withholding information, undermining trust, and protecting its own. All while opposition leaders like Senate Minority Leader Schumer mockingly accuse Speaker Johnson of losing control of his caucus, even as Johnson insists that no one in Congress is blocking the release of Epstein documents and that GOP leaders are merely resisting a Democratic political charade, rhetoric that may fall flat if public frustration continues to mount, and if the political pressure surrounding Epstein's legacy continues to engulf the White House, Capitol Hill, and the upcoming 2024 election, where questions about integrity, accountability, and truth-telling will be front and center as voters decide who they trust to lead in a climate poisoned by years of division, secrecy, and scandal.